Welcome back to my channel. I'm Traben. These are my tomes, and today we're looking at everything I read in the second half of November. Let's talk about it. I put out my 10 before the end video and then immediately started moving through that very quickly. Everything I read over the last 2 weeks was in my 10 before the end, with the exception of one title, the audiobook for Meddling Kids. We'll start with Meddling Kids because this one was one that I had some very mixed feelings on. There are certain things about this book that I really enjoyed and others that I didn't. So this is a reimagining of the Scooby Gang as older individuals who have moved on from sleuthing in their hometown to various places across the country and meeting very different, leading very different lives from when they were a band together as kids or teenagers. It's darker and grittier, which is something I expected, but I feel like there were some missteps in both the prose and in the content of the book that I feel like it just didn't quite get there. Broadly speaking, I loved the plot. I loved how they brought in these kind of Cthulhu-esque ideas of like great old ones is kind of like the linchpin of the mystery they're trying to solve. I thought that was really cool. I liked some of the character interactions, especially between our Daphne and our Velma character, although I know several people were not fans of the way that they were depicted. And I don't think that where they ended up made sense with what came before in the book. So the biggest issues that are plaguing this book are the writing. So the writing bounces between just straightforward prose and this style that is describing what's happening in the scene as though it were a movie. And it just bounces back and forth between the two of those without any real, like, clear indication. Now, I was listening to the audiobook, so this was less disruptive, I feel, than it might have been just reading through the book. But the other issue, and one that initially I didn't have as much of an issue with, was just the wording that the author used. They verbed a lot of nouns in a way that didn't really serve much of a purpose. A character says that he's going to do something, and it says that he rightoed or something like that. Something along those lines. Like, he was like, yes, sir, he rightoed. And it's weird. I don't like it. And at first, and I had heard these complaints. I was reading some reviews partway through the book. I had heard these complaints, and I didn't feel like they were that bad at the beginning, especially because they were fairly infrequent. But as the book went on, it did become more and more pronounced and more frustrating. I also felt like structurally toward the end of the story, there's a breakdown of the plot where it kind of comes to a screeching halt as we reveal who's behind the machinations that are going on around town. And it's honestly the most obvious character, the most obvious person it could have been. And up to that point, it had been pretty sneaky with like figuring out actual clues and like finding out what was really going on the night that they supposedly thwarted this guy in a rubber mask many years ago. But something else was going on, and they actually had to go like investigate and find clues and figure out some assumptions that they had made that were incorrect. And I thought all that was really clever. And then to just make it be the most obvious evil character behind everything. I also want to give some content warnings. So this does talk about a character unalives themselves, and it also there is some part of the villain monologue at the end that is transphobic. I don't feel like it was malicious. I just feel like it was tone deaf, and so for me, it wasn't as egregious of a problem as it could have been. But this ultimately still ended up as a 3, which is still getting kind of a bump from me enjoying the Scooby-Doo nostalgia aspects of it. Had it been any other kind of material, it probably would have gotten a lower score. Probably would have been a 2. But that Scooby Gang feeling, and the fact that they were tying it in with this idea of like elder gods, which is one of my favorite subgenres of horror, really worked for me. And I really liked the sleuthing out of clues, but so much else was working against this book. So generally, I wouldn't recommend it unless you are very interested in that specific subject matter. I read Akane-Banashi number 14. This has the rather unfortunate task of following up volume 13, which I thought was amazing and was an excellent exhibition of a side character while still also maintaining a bit of the overall story and moving it forward. This one, we shift our focus back to Akane, but a lot of it is about her past and her relationship with another one of the characters. And it's not bad. I gave it 4 stars, but it's not the heights of the previous volume, which is common for manga. You will have like these really high points, and then you'll have like, you gotta, it can't all be rise. It can't all be like explosive and crazy all the time. So you'll have these like really important moments, and then you need to kind of take a step back and breathe. So I think it was doing what it needed to do. It just is not a volume that I think is going to stand out among the things that came before. Akane-Banashi, still an amazing book. It is all about the art of Rakugo, which is the Japanese art of public storytelling, which I think is amazing. I have a review for it up on my channel if you want to learn more. When I had read, I think, the first maybe 7 or 8 volumes. But it is still going strong. I'm still loving it. Still want to pick it up and continue reading. Highly recommended. One of my favorite manga going right now. I read through Kaiju Kamui number 1, and I think in my 10 before the end, I even mentioned that I feel like this was not going to be anything new, but sometimes you just want to have cool kaiju fights. This is very reminiscent of Neon Genesis Evangelion, if you're familiar with that, except for it's lost all of the pretense and the religious allegory that kind of seeps into that anime's DNA. This is just monsters attacked us, and our solution for monsters attacking us are take a monster and make it to where we can pilot it. I want to say one of the early Mechagodzillas was actually built around the bones of the original Godzilla that died in the first movie, and then we retrofitted it with all the electronics, with all the technology in order to fight the new Godzilla threat. This has that same vibe. Kaiju designs were very cool. Fighting was fun. Still kind of okay. Like, if you're a big kaiju fan, pick it up. It's like mindless entertainment, and jump straight into the action beats that you know it's going to fall back on, that you know it's going to prioritize. So that was refreshing. That it wasn't a different type of manga that slowly changed into the action shonen genre. Like Kaiju number 8 started off a little bit more comedic. This just goes straight into action, serious, military. Let's go fight the kaiju. Let's go fight the monsters. And like I said, the designs were cool. Fights were fun. I'd recommend it. 3 stars. It was good. Tokyo Fears Rhapsody #2 continues to be one of my new favorites from the manga scene. This follows Hachiro, who is a monster designed to destroy humanity that ended up falling in love with humans and all of the things we create, like ice cream and beach balls and all these different things that he's like super into. This continues the story, has a very brutal fight scene where Hachiro is up against an opponent that is obviously leagues better than him. This one focused a lot more on Hachiro's relationship with the mad scientist that created him, and this kind of father and son relationship that we established in the first volume, and we're still kind of playing tongue-in-cheek with it, where this one is like Hachiro secretly wanting acknowledgement from what he views as his father, and the mad scientist being like cold and distant because he only cares about, like, he's out to destroy the world. Like, of course he's not thinking about praising this monster for not following orders. And so it's just really fun. The Super Sentai team equivalent shows up again, who Hachiro's like super into. And so yeah, it had a lot of laughs, it had a lot of fun. Check it out if you want a very squarely comedic monster focused comic. It's a lot of it's great fun. Read through We Are Legion, which is the Bobverse Volume 1. Got this really nice copy with the sprayed edges. These are new ones coming out. And I definitely am planning on picking up the second volume of this. This is part of my 10 new series to check out for 2025. Really enjoyed it. It ended up as 4 stars. I think the only thing really holding it back is that it doesn't feel at all like a complete story. It just feels like enough of the story that the author wanted to tell to reach like a novel length, and then it just kind of stops. We do kind of get to a stopping point, but by the end of this book, there's so many different directions that the story is going that there's a lot dangling. There's a lot left undone by the end of this book. So this is about a character, Bob, who very early on into the book meets a tragic end, but has donated his brain to this company that was going to bring him back when the technology had gotten to that point. They do bring him back as a machine mind in control of these different little robots. He does a bunch of different tasks to go through this trial, and eventually becomes the functional AI for a self-replicating ship. There's already some interesting things being said here about individuality and about the self. It didn't dive too hard into those, because this is ultimately like a comedy series, I feel. It's very tongue-in-cheek, it's very light. The science is fascinating, but it's not heavy on the science, so it's very approachable. I think it's based on actual ideas of like these self-replicating robots and nanotechnology, things that we are striving for, but it doesn't go into a lot of technical jargon, and ultimately I think a lot of that is kind of hand-waved away as, you know, like, we don't need to explain it. You understand the gist. So this one I would recommend if you like the Murderbot Diaries, another one that I picked up to look at for this year. I feel like they are in a similar vein, where there's this kind of comedic sci-fi story with a protagonist that is often snarky and disillusioned with the world, but I'd recommend it if you are a fan of like softer SF stuff, so check it out. I read through Brigands and Breadknives by Travis Baldree, the third in his collective universe that started with Legends and Lattes, and we had the prequel book, Bookshops and Bone Dust. This one, he promised, or he mentioned before it came out, that this was going to be less of a like cozy fantasy book, and I can definitely see why he put that caution out there. But I do feel like it has similar vibes to the first two books, and still has cozy moments to it. But the big difference here is Fern, our main character, is trying to escape a mundane life where she feels stuck. She is the proprietor of the bookstore from book two, Bookshops and Bone Dust, who then later on decides to move into the town that Viv is set up in. Anyway, she is feeling trapped in her life and trapped as like this bookkeeper. We get a sense that it maybe is not what she wanted to do, but she's not sure what she wanted to do because her whole life it seems like taking over this bookstore was just like the expected thing. And so just kind of on a whim, she hops into a traveling cart and goes on a crazy adventure. It definitely has stronger feelings of just like a straight D&D-esque feeling, and a journey that is punctuated by a lot of combat and escapes and things that you would typically ascribe to the action fantasy genre, but there are also moments of quiet reflection, and there at the core is still the story of trying to figure out who you are and trying to navigate relationships. And I think that aspect of it still strongly ties it into the previous two books. I liked almost every character in here. The main cast was a lot of fun and interesting. All very different characters. Their playing off of each other was really great. There are some laugh out loud funny moments in here. And then again, like some action set pieces that I thought were cool. So I feel like it definitely has a different flavor than Legends and Lattes or Bookshops and Bone Dust, but I think it is still a nicely paced and fairly easy to read book that is going to give you those cozy fantasy vibes, in the sense that it's like a very easygoing, almost like a road trip style story that, at least for me, gave me the feelings of playing D&D in high school. So if you're a fan of that kind of fantasy feel, you do well to pick it up. If you liked Legends and Lattes, you liked Bookshops and Bone Dust, and you're avoiding this one because of what Baldry said about it being less cozy, I don't think there's enough change in here from his core ideas and his core writing style to warrant avoiding it. I think that it still has a lot of the relationship building and keeping the characters' growth at the core of the book to make it enjoyable. Finally, the book that I was partway through at the end of the last video, Isles of Emberdark. Last time I talked about this book, I said that I felt like it was balancing the adventure story on this primitive planet and the larger Cosmere elements fairly well. I have revised that assessment after having gone through the whole book. I don't feel like the two elements that Sanderson is working with here gel in a way that is satisfying anywhere within the story. Yes, Sixth of Dusk and Starling have to work together at one point to investigate some happenings on this island, but the way that it gets there doesn't feel cohesive, and I feel like there's too much focus in this book on the larger ideas of the Cosmere, to the point where if you haven't read nearly everything that Sanderson has put out for the Cosmere, I feel like a lot of this book is going to be entirely incomprehensible to you. They gloss over so much development and so many ideas about this wider universe, these different planets, their interactions with each other, their tech levels, their government, and the way that they operate. I think it would be overwhelming for someone who isn't already familiar with Scandriel and what's going on in Roshar, and there's like time dilations in here. It's so much. And I feel like the second half of the book spends so much time with that story that when it tries to go back to meld in Sixth of Dusk into that framework, because the beginning of the book is Sixth of Dusk's story, when it tries to go back and integrate him into it, it feels like this entire interaction is so insignificant in the grander scope of this larger world you put out that it's really hard to bring those two things together. So that's not to say the book is bad by any stretch. I gave it 4 out of 5. I just really want to caution you that this is not the book to jump into the Cosmere. This is something to read after you've already read all of Mistborn Era 1 and Mistborn Era 2, and you've read through the Stormlight Archive. There's even things in here that I'm only vaguely familiar with because I have not read Elantris, and I haven't read... there's one other book. I can't remember offhand which one it is. There's a couple of books I haven't read yet, and I'm pretty confident that some of the characters are from worlds that were described in those books. But I have enough passing familiarity with characters showing up in other books that I kind of understand what's going on. So even someone who has read a good number of these books, there's something there are things in here that have not been explored yet. There are things in here that aren't explained. He doesn't have the time. This is a for Sanderson, this is a shorter book. And so yeah, it's not that I felt like it was a bad book. It's that I felt like it went way too hard into the Cosmere lore, and I don't think that it ultimately did an excellent job with melding the story of the crew of this ship with the story of Sixth of Dusk and what's happening on his planet. I liked the adventure aspect of it. It almost felt like kind of like Moana esque lore for the background of his people. And that's something we haven't seen in the Cosmere yet, which was interesting and refreshing, but it wasn't enough, and it's abutting this story that's so far beyond the scope of what this story could have been, because this could have just been an exploration of a planet with fewer resources, fewer knowledge of the overall Cosmere, and them struggling against these bigger powers. And it could have just been Sixth of Dusk's story along with the people he was trying to protect. But I feel like it really got muddied with all the Cosmere stuff being shoved in here. So again, still got 4 out of 5. Read it if you've read a good amount of Cosmere material. So what is on the docket for the next couple of weeks? So I have about 200 pages left of Kings of the Wild. I'm really enjoying this one so far. I think it's right now it's gearing up to be maybe a 4, maybe a 5-star. We'll see how it ends. I'm also listening to Of Monsters and Mainframes on audiobook, and I'm about 20% of the way through that. After that, it's going to be, I think I'm going to have a little bit of a break where I can fit in some Christmas murder mysteries, and then I've still got to read Hollow Kingdom, and in a few weeks, the Sanderson short story collection comes out that I'm going to want to pick up. So, and that will be, that and Hollow Kingdom will finish up the 10 Before the End. So that's really good. Look forward to another wrap up in a couple of weeks. As always, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe so we can grow this corner of our booktube community. Go back and look at some of the other content on my channel. Maybe look at the Akane-Banashi review that I posted, or maybe my crazy wild theory about what was happening in the Stormlight archive. In any case, I hope your reading journey is going well. And until the next one, take care.